So anybody else glad to be here tonight? Just except me. All right, here we go. I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. We are moving into step 10. I don't know if Rodney has that back there on the screen for me. All right. So we've been moving along in our yearly talk within the Recovery Alive Christ-Centered 12 Steps. And this month we're going to be talking about something that many of you who've been in recovery, you've probably heard this terminology a little bit. If you've been in recovery any length of time, I guarantee you, if you grew up in church, you'll hear somebody say this terminology. You'll say, the power of one day at a time. Anybody ever heard of that? And so I grew up with family, with people in church, and people always say, you just got to take it one day at a time. And there is truth to that. 100%. There's truth to that. But what happens is a lot of times, and we're going to talk about it tonight, what happens is people often want life just to come to them instead of them being on the offensive. You see, one thing I've learned in my life is that sometimes you got to go get it. You just can't wait for life to happen because life's always going to throw you curveballs. If you want a different job, if you want to make more money, go get it. Hello? If you're working, now listen to me. I have worked all kinds of jobs in my life. I've worked fast food. I've worked in the school system. I've worked in the substance abuse field. I've worked in chicken factories. I've worked all kinds of jobs, okay? I've done all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that I will tell you is, if you don't like where you're at, do something different. If you don't want to be flipping burgers anymore, do something different. Listen, I'm going to say something people ain't going to like, but I am not a big proponent of the minimum wage being $15, $16 an hour. Ooh, I just offended somebody. It's okay. If you don't like it, get another job that has that kind of money. Fast food was never meant for everybody to do long term unless you're going to be a manager. It's okay to do it for a while. I lost my job several years ago as a counselor, and I was this close of working at Subway because I needed to feed my family. You have to take care of your family, yes. You have to take care of your family. But if you don't like it, get another job. I had to get another job. And so in life, you just can't let life happen to you. Sometimes you got to go get it. And sometimes in your recovery, you just can't wait always for things to happen to you. You got to go get it. If you want what he or she has, go get it. Don't wait. Don't compare yourself to others, which is what we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. Don't compare yourself to others and think that what they have can't happen to you. Listen, I have a goal, and this sounds pretty ambitious, and some of you guys know this. I have a goal in my life to one day run a marathon. Now, before you run a marathon, you got to run a mile, right? I'll get there. But I have a goal and a dream to run a marathon one day, and one day when I do that, it might be years down the road, but one day I'm going to do it, dang it. I may be crawling across that finish line, but I'm going to do it, But when I do it, I'm going to raise some funds. I'm going to raise some money for Recovery Alive so we can do more and more. I want to raise about $20,000 to $30,000. Hello? And when I do that, dude, if I'm training to do that, do you think I need to follow around somebody who looks like me? Tell me how to run a marathon. I'm not going to do that with somebody who looks like me. I'm going to go talk to Pastor Lipsy. I'm going to go talk to Don, his wife. I'm going to go talk to men and women in this church who have done it before. Because I'm not going to compare myself to them, but I'm going to begin to, one day at a time, begin to surround myself with people who are where I want to be in life. You see, you got to have people in your life. I was talking about this today with somebody. There's 3 kinds of people you need to have in your life. Ready? One, you need to have people who are ahead of you. You need to have people who are in front of you, who can pull you up to where they are. There are men and women in this church every week on Sunday mornings and Wednesdays who are a huge part of my life. And man, they have faith. They're like a hero in the faith. It seems like sometimes when life hits, it just doesn't bother them because they have such a deep and close relationship with God. They have developed this over a lifetime of trusting God, over a lifetime of being through heartache after heartache and seeing God come through. And when they do that, I want to be around those people. I want those people in my life who are going to encourage me, who are going to uplift me, but also tell me the truth in love. Sometimes I need to be told, Brian, you're being an idiot. I don't need people just to tell me what I want to hear. But then oftentimes you need people who are right there on your level. These are the people who are like the accountability partners of your life. These are the people that you go to the gym with, people who are there with you on the same level as you are, where you work together with things, you support each other, you love one another. But then there's people also that you need who are behind you, who may not be where you are at your recovery, and they need you to pull them up towards you. But see, the problem is if you don't have people that you're striving for and that you're striving to, if all you're doing is trying to, and I'm trying to help somebody here, if all you're doing is trying to help people, but yet you don't have people in front of you that's pulling you, you'll find yourself going back to the same old things because they will drag you back. See, that's why tonight, you've heard me say this before, God never called you to be no missionary dater. People know what I'm talking about? God didn't call you to be with somebody where they're not even on the same spiritual wavelength as you. God has called you to be with somebody who's either the same as you or ahead of you. If all you're doing is trying to get this person that you really like to get them saved and to get them to come to Christ, you better be careful because you could easily fall right back into that lifestyle, back into that person that maybe you used to be. Y'all didn't know I was getting relationships advice tonight, did you? I just got off track. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's okay. Just follow with me. So tonight, as we talk about one day at a time, we're going to look at step 10. Step 10 says we continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. 1 Timothy 1:10 says, cling to your faith and keep your conscience clear. You see, as we move into the next 3 steps and we wind down our yearly walk through the Christ Center 12 steps, I want you to know that the next 3 steps are oftentimes referred, if you've been in recovery for any shorter amount of time, you'll hear this term sometimes. You definitely hear it in AA and NA, and you hear it in the secular 12-step programs, is that these next 3 steps are really dealing with maintenance phases. That you're just trying to do things to help you long-term in your life to maintain day after day, one day at a time. Now listen, there is some truth to that, and a lot of truth to that. But what happens is a lot of times, we just want behavior modification instead of life transformation. Is everybody okay with that? Sometimes we want to be able to God to give us behavior modification, but what he wants to do is to make you thrive in your life. He doesn't want you just to maintain. He wants you to thrive. You see, the enemy, the Bible says the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy your life. But Jesus says, I've come so that you may have life and have it more what? More abundantly. More abundantly means to overflow of excess. God, that doesn't sound like just maintaining in life. I'm not sitting here saying you're going to be a millionaire. I'm not saying you're going to have $1 million. I'm not saying all those kind of things in your life. But what I am telling you is that us living in this mundane kind of life where we do the same old thing over and over and over again is not always maybe what God's called us to do. God's called you to thrive. And so you have to ask yourself tonight, and I want you to ask yourself before you leave here. Don't be afraid to ask God this question. What's next? What is next? What do you want me to do? What is the next thing you want me to do? Who should I talk to? Who should I invest my time with? Where should I go for employment? What should I do here? What should I do there? Because, see, God is a God of transformation, and he's constantly wanting to transition you from one place to another in your life. So you become more and more like him. He doesn't want you just to be at the same place spiritually, physically, and emotionally. There's things that I did as a child that I no longer do now. I don't suck a bottle now. Anybody else suck a bottle? Depends on what kind of bottle it is, I guess. I don't lay in a crib anymore. I don't need somebody to feed me. I do those things on my own. And so God is transitioning you and causing you to thrive so that you can live life more abundantly. You can't do it if you're just doing the same old thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So tonight, what I want to chat with you about for the next few moments, I'm not going to take too much longer, but what I want to chat with you about tonight is, even though, yes, there's truth in living one day at a time, and I absolutely believe that, while we are living one day at a time, though, and we take one moment at a time, and sometimes 1 second at a time, sometimes if we're not careful, we fall into pitfalls of living one day at a time. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. Miranda was having surgery this week, and I was sitting in the hospital, and I was like, oh, that's good. I like that. And I began to write this stuff down and really just begin to pull it apart. And I believe the first one tonight, the first one we can look at tonight, a pitfall that if we're not careful, is this pitfall of complacency. Complacency tonight is a killer. You've always got to continue to advance yourself in your recovery in your life. Listen, I don't know about you, but being a recovering addict, I just can't, I struggle with just doing the same old thing. Okay? In my head, I have to ask myself, just like I ask you, well, what is the next thing I can do? Now, if I'm not careful, I did it with drug addiction. I did it with my addiction itself. Because one thing would just lead into another. Started with marijuana, then it goes to alcohol, then it goes to cocaine, then it goes to pills, then it goes to meth, and all these different things. And it just continues and continues and continues. A person who struggles with pornography, one day you just may be looking at a book one day at a grocery store, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, here you are sitting in jail for something you did. I'm not saying that happens to everybody, but there's a progression that happens. And so what happens is the same thing happens in our recovery. Just as we have progressed in other things, we got to continue to progress in our recovery. And if we're not careful, we get into this place of complacency. Let me share with you really about what complacency is. Complacency is a state of listlessness, passivity, in which you find comfort in being mediocre and the status quo while you indulge your own whims and feel your passion for God fade away. That's complacency. You see, God, as I shared before, is a transitional and transformational God. As his Holy Spirit continues to mold you, he never intended for you to stay the same place. If you are not asking the question, like I said, what is next? Sometimes it's easy to see complacency creep in. As a matter of fact, Jesus talked about this in Revelation 3 when he was talking to the churches. When he spoke to the church of Laodicea in Revelation 3, he says, I know your deeds, that you're neither cold nor hot. And I wish you were either hot or cold, either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. I never want God to say that about me. I never want to live a life of complacency when I know there's so much more in my life that God was calling me to do and God was calling me to be. Pastor Lipsy has shared this before, and I've heard other people share it from time to time. There's a place in life oftentimes where dreams go to die, and that's the graveyard. You go to any graveyard in America, there are people laying there who never had fulfilled dreams. They stopped when they could have kept going. They gave up. How many inventions could have been created? How many things could have happened if they would have just followed their dreams? But yet, sometimes if we're not careful, we'll go to the grave, just living a complacent life, and never fulfill everything that God wants me to do. One of the hardest things for me to accept in my life is the day that I die, when I stand before Jesus, and he looks at me and says, there was so much more I had for you to do. But because of whatever reason, you didn't fulfill them. You can put whatever you want in that. Whatever X is. Maybe it was insecurity. Maybe it was fear of the unknown. Whatever those things are, God is calling you today to thrive. Many of you know Pastor Lipsy. Many years ago, he did an Ironman. And when he did that Ironman, I remember him telling me, Brian, I'm only going to do one Ironman. I have a dream to run an Ironman by the time I'm 50. 45 came along, he still hadn't done it. 46 came along, he still hadn't did it. And finally, he realized when he was about 48, he goes, well, I better start doing something about this Ironman. He set a goal for himself. Something inside of me said, this ain't going to be his only Ironman. Because the way his mind works, very similar to mine, is once he runs one, there's going to be, okay, what's next? What else am I going to do? Now, about 4 Ironmans in, and he's training for his 5th Ironman, he just constantly wants to continue to improve himself. He refuses to be complacent. Because when you get complacent sometimes, your passion and your zeal for God begins to fade away if you're not careful. Your passion for church, your passion for helping others, your passion for your recovery sometimes begins to get on the back burner if you're not careful. COVID was a great example of this. Anybody remember that? Well, we did the same old thing every single day. Sometimes we were forced to, but we lived a life of complacency. When you live a life of complacency, another pitfall that you will experience, number 2, is you begin to do things on your own. You see, it's easy to get complacent and believe that you can just do it yourself, or this is the way I've always done it, so this is the way it should be. You see, if we're not careful, we can get full of ourselves without knowing it, and when we do that, you need to look back at step 1, that you don't have any control or power. You see, life, I don't know if you've noticed this, but life is a dogfight. Life doesn't always turn out the way you think it should. Life doesn't always happen. Pitfalls happen. Tragedy happens in your life. And see, every single one of us, guys, are like ships in an ocean. And if you're not careful, what happens is while you are in that ocean of life, if you don't find yourself being anchored and putting your anchor in something that's solid that can keep you there, you'll find yourself doing the same old things. And one day you'll realize, you'll wake up and the storms of life have happened, and you're saying to yourself, how did I ever get here? When those jail door closes, those prison doors close on you, when DCS says, I'm coming to take your kids, when tragedy happens in your life, all these different things, right? And see, if you find yourself doing everything on your own, when those tragedies happen, when those things in life happen, and they will happen, I promise you, it may not be as severe as what I talked about, but it rains on the just and the unjust. Anybody ever have more month than money? Hello? Anybody ever have just one thing after another financially just fall apart? And sometimes it wasn't even no fault of your own. It just happened. I'm fighting with insurances right now. Because several weeks ago when those storms came through Cleveland, I haven't been up here and talked about it. When those storms came through Cleveland, when there was a tornado warning about 6 in the morning, it sounded like a tornado coming through Cleveland. I live off Dalton Pike. And living off Dalton Pike, I felt this, that sounded just like a tornado coming through my neighborhood. And when that happened, I thought everything was okay. I looked outside, everything was cool after the wind had calmed down. I wasn't an idiot. I didn't go out there in the middle of it. But after everything had settled down, my neighbor and stuff were out there. They were looking at everything. Trampolines and basketball rims were thrown around everywhere. I looked at my house. I was like, oh, everything's cool. The siding looks okay. The roof just seems like it's all right. What I didn't realize when I looked into my backyard, though, it was a different story. When I looked into my backyard, my privacy fence was completely on the ground. The wind or tornado or whatever it was pulled my privacy fence completely out of the ground, took the concrete out of it, and laid it flat on the ground, all the way down, about 125 feet of it. There was 3 big trees that were down in my backyard. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, how much is this going to cost for me to repair? What kind of ragtag redneck group am I going to have to get together to come remove these trees? That was what was going through my head. I was stressed about 6, and I had to go to work at 7:30 that morning. And I'm still fighting insurances to try to get them to pay for that fence. Sometimes life doesn't always go the way you think it should. Sometimes life hits instantly, and sometimes you got to react to it, right? But yet, if you find yourself doing things by yourself, oftentimes you'll wake up and realize, where was the church? Where was the church when I needed them? Where was Recovery Alive when I needed them? I'll tell you a story. A couple years ago, during the pandemic, I had this guy who reached out to me. And he was a part of, at the time, we were running Celebrate Recovery. And he came to me, and I hadn't seen him in probably a year. And I've always reached out to him occasionally, but never heard anything back. It was right there in the beginning of the pandemic. Just like with so many people, I reached out to him because I hadn't heard anything from them. Didn't know what happened, didn't know if they relapsed, didn't know how life was going for them at the time. Didn't know if they lost their jobs. All this different stuff, right, that we all kind of did. Didn't hear anything from him for a whole year. One day I received a text or a Facebook message that said, hey, Brian, can you give me some money tonight so I can make sure I can get back and forth to work tonight? If I don't have any money for gas, I'm not going to be able to keep my job. I was like, okay, well, I haven't seen you for a whole year, and that's the first thing you ask me is give me money? Okay, well, people fall on hard times. That's okay. I get it. He said, you can send it to my Cash App. Cash App. I said, I haven't seen you in a year, and you want me just to give you like $40. Back then, gas was like $4 a gallon. I said, you want me to give you like $50 for gas? I haven't seen you in a year. I mean, I'm all for helping people. I'll help you. I love you and help you out as much as I can. But you want me to send it to your Cash App? Oh, okay. Well, I didn't do that. But I said, I'll tell you what. I said, how about right now, within the next 20 minutes? Are you free in the next 20 minutes? He said, yeah. I said, do you have enough gas to get to the Speedway on APD 40 right in front of the church? He said, possibly. And I said, okay. I said, meet me there in 20 minutes and I'll fill your tank up. And I'll even buy you something to eat. For the next few minutes, all he kept telling me was, well, you're just like every other preacher. You're just like every other pastor. They don't love me. They don't care. I think, dude, did you not hear what I just said? I'm willing to give you money in your gas tank so you can go to work. I'm willing to give you a hot meal. Have you ever had Speedway's pizzas? I'll get you a large and a Coke. and a cookie to go with it. I said, I'll buy it. I got points. I'll help you, man. You can have them. All these different things. And he just kept bashing me, bashing the church when I was just trying to help. You see, what he was doing, though, is he was trying to live life by himself. And when those storms come in life, he wasn't wanting to go to work. He wasn't even working. I found out 3 weeks later he ended up in treatment because he was struggling with an addiction. And I get it, and I have so much compassion for him and for anybody else like that. But I'm also not going to enable people. Hello? And you shouldn't either. I love you. I will take the clothes off my back. But I'm telling you something, I'm not going to enable anybody. Are there times I get taken advantage of? You better believe it. There are times I guarantee you get taken advantage of. But one thing I will never do is I will never enable you. Knowingly. If I find out this is what's going on, I'm not going to, it's not helping you. And so what I'm saying is, though, when you get into a place of doing things on your own, you'll blame everybody for where you are in life. You'll blame the church. You'll blame the pastor. You'll blame Recovery Alive. You'll blame people after people after people. But until you get to the point when it's more than just other people that's causing pain in your life, you'll find yourself doing things to get back to where you used to be. Life ain't always about what people did to you. Sometimes, and I'm a victim of it. I'm not a victim of it. I've done it before, where I've blamed everybody else for my problems. But really, I was the problem. I was the person who was the biggest issue of all. And I was so blinded that I couldn't even see it. And until I opened up my eyes and saw the truth, I just stayed in that rut. Does anybody know what I'm talking about tonight? Am I the only one? I've been in those places where I've been in a rut because all I wanted to do was to blame others. Which leads me to my second point. Stand with me. Leads me to my third point. I'm sorry. Another pitfall that you will experience if you're not careful is the pitfall of comparing yourself to others. When you're able to give thanks because of someone else's achievement, when you give thanks and are willing to cheer for other people's life, for good things that are a job promotion, do you understand that that paints a blessing? It puts a target on your back for God to bless you. Because guess what? Not only are they having something great happen in their life, but one day it's going to come around to you. And the next thing you know, it's going to come around again to them. And then it's going to come around again to you. But if you ask the question, well, what do they have to do to get that? As they just sucked up to people. You ever heard that? Maybe you've done that before. If that's the kind of life you want to live by comparing your life to other people, you better watch it. When you're living one day at a time, one moment at a time, and you begin to compare yourself to others, and you begin to look at, wow, other people have things that I don't have. You know? Listen, Miranda keeps asking me every day, or not every day, but some day she'll ask the question, why don't we just go get a new car for you? Why don't we just go get a new car? I drive a 2011 Ford Focus. It doesn't have any air conditioning. It's old. Not say old, but it's older. It's got 170,000 miles on it. I run that thing to the ground. I don't need some expensive car to ride back and forth to work. Yeah, it'd be nice when I'm in Madisonville or Athens to have some air conditioning. But I love having the wind blow through my beard on the way down 411. Very freeing. Some of you guys have no idea what I'm talking about. It's okay. I don't need air conditioning. As long as I get home, there's air conditioning. What I'm saying is, though, I could very easily compare myself to other people and say, man, they got a car that's got air conditioning. Now, some of you are sitting here thinking to yourself, Brian, why don't you just go get it fixed? That's expensive. Anybody know how much it costs to get an air compressor? And to get air running through your car, it's expensive. It's not cheap. Hundreds, if not, probably $1,000 or more possibly. It's not cheap. Sometimes I thought about get a redneck maneuver, just putting a fan in the back and somehow running some electricity through there and get some water blowing in there. Yeah, some of y'all yeah. Anyway, but when I begin to compare myself to others, sometimes I miss the blessing that God wants to put in my life. God wants to bless you. But as long as you compare yourself to others, you see, sometimes tonight, last night, did we have a chip? I wasn't here last week. We had a chip ceremony last week, right? You see somebody that comes down here and receives a 6-month chip, receive a 90-day chip or a 9-year chip, whatever. But yet you just been sober now for 2 weeks. Or you just been in this recovery journey for whatever it is, and you see someone's life that seems so much better than yours. Sometimes you don't know the hell they had to go through. Sometimes you didn't know the days they had to go get it and work their recovery. Sometimes you didn't see the heartbreak that they had to go through. Sometimes you didn't see the kids that still to this day don't want to talk to them. Sometimes you don't see the prayers that they had to pray every day just to continue on with their recovery when times got rough. But the fact that they're still sober today is a miracle. The fact that you only have 30 days in recovery is a miracle. You understand that? If you truly understood, for those of you who've never done drugs, of how fentanyl and meth plays in your brain, it's a miracle that anybody today can stay sober for over a year or even 30 days. I'm not going to have you raise your hand, but there's several of you in here that have many, many months, if not years, in recovery for those two things, meth or fentanyl. Do you understand that's the combo today? Meth and fentanyl? Where multiple people use it together or back to back from each other. Or maybe your struggle was alcohol. Do you know how hard it is to come off alcohol? The fact that you're still standing here today and alcohol was your struggle, it's a miracle. Only God could allow that to happen. Maybe you're here today and you've been coming to recovery alive for some time, and maybe your struggle may not be addiction, so to speak. But maybe you've experienced a great hurt in your life. You've been through so much trauma, so much abuse, so much neglect in your life that you've thought about even ending your own life. And the fact that you're still standing here today on your 2 feet, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. It rains today on the just and the unjust. It doesn't matter who you are. Listen to me. There's a woman sitting in this church right now, in that office, that I had a great conversation with earlier tonight, who's fighting breast cancer. And as I began to talk with her and allow her to share with me her heart about what's happening, tears began to flow down her face. She's got so much more treatment that she has to go through of chemo, radiation. And one day she's going to have surgery. You don't have her story. But can I tell you, one day she's going to have a story to tell other people. The mess that you find yourself going through right now, living one day at a time, it's going to be that moment where in a year from now, if you keep putting your right foot in front of your left foot, if you keep moving, if you keep breathing, even when all hope is lost, I'm telling you, if you keep doing that and you continue to seek after God, you will find yourself in a better place. There's people in this room right now that have struggled with mental illness throughout your life. And to this day, you're no longer having to be dependent on a medication. And I have no problem with medication. I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist. I have no problem with medications. But we are the most overly prescribed medicated country in the world. But we're also the most blessed country in the world. Imagine that. There's a lot that goes on with that. But tonight, what I'm trying to tell you is this. Maybe tonight you have found yourself in one of those three pitfalls. Maybe tonight in your recovery you've been very complacent. Or maybe tonight you've gotten to a place and God's doing some great things in your life, but you've gotten to a place where you're doing everything on your own power, your own strength. And then the last thing is maybe tonight you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. You're negative, you're miserable. Jealous maybe of why you don't have what they have yet. Can I tell you something? Over the next several weeks, we're going to learn something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and that's disciplines. How many of y'all love discipline? I don't. But can I tell you, in order for you to grow in your life, there's some disciplines that you need to pick up. There's some disciplines that you are going to have to take on. We're going to talk about all of those in the coming weeks. But in order for you to go one day at a time, one moment at a time, there's some things that you're going to have to do every single day. You wonder why sometimes you haven't heard God speak to you? Maybe you need to open up His book. Maybe you need to open up the Bible every once in a while. God's always speaking. Walk outside. Look at the beauty of what's around you here in East Tennessee. God is always talking to you. God's always talking through circumstances. He's always talking through problems that you're having. He's always ministering to you. Some of you need to make church attendance a priority this year as a discipline. It shouldn't be just a one-time thing a year. It should be a priority in your life. Some of you need to take on the discipline of being able to pray every single day. These sound simple for some of you, but how many of us are actually doing them every single day? If you do small little things every single day, every single day, every single day, you eventually get to where you want to go. Listen, I'm closing with this. Some of you have looked at me, and I appreciate when you walk in here tonight and people say, man, you're half the man you used to be. I appreciate that. I really do. I'm very grateful for that. You don't know how much that means to me. But every single day, I have to put in the work for me losing the weight. What I decided to do was not an easy way out. Some people say, well, you cheated. Well, I cheated. Yeah, I cheated death. Okay? I still have to work on my weight loss as much as anybody else. And I have to work on it mentally, physically, spiritually. I journal, if not every day, at least a few times a week. I process those emotions. I get into God's Word. I begin to worship Him and allow Him to be my fulfillment and not food. Hello? I go outside to